Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. This is College Football with Sam, once again joined by Kris Drew, who is kind enough to come on the channel again after he joined us to preview Ohio State, Tennessee, give us his thoughts and his little bit of his inside access to the program. Before we get started here, we're going to be talking about the Rose Bowl, Ohio State versus Oregon, and also react a little bit to Ohio State's massive win over Tennessee. Please, if you have Twitter, go and search up Kris Drew. Give him a follow. It's Kris with a K, K-R-I-S, Drew. And also, Menace to Sports on YouTube. He is a co-host there with Zach Smith. Go look him up, subscribe to their channel. And if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to my channel here. Hit the like button. Share this content around so that we can get more people to join College Football with Sam. I believe right now, we're the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube. Our goal is to become one day the best college football channel on YouTube, and only you can help us do that because I'm just one guy on a channel. And I know that Kris and Zach and all the people they work with also know that, you know, they need viewers, they need subscribers and people to interact. So please do that, and also comment your reaction to what we're talking about as the video goes on down in the comment section below. If you want to support the channel monetarily, check out the Patreon page and merchandise store via the links in the description or down below in the pinned comment. And almost forgot to mention this, but when you comment on the video, and Kris, you can do this as well, you enter in our giveaway where there are going to be 4 winners, a $20 gift card, Visa for anything, and then a $20 gift card as well to my merchandise store. So comment and you'll be entered in, and that lasts throughout this entire week. And also, last but not least, join our Discord server where we talk college football all the time via the link in the description. But I want to get your thoughts first on what was a blowout, if I'm being honest. 21-0 at the end of the first quarter, Ohio State versus Tennessee. I covered that game live, watched it, and it was exciting. You know, the environment, the big plays, and how Ohio State just really shut Tennessee down. What was your reaction to not just that the whole game, but the first quarter performance, really?
It was a dismantling, Sam, from start to finish. You and I talked a lot last week about, is it a Ryan Day problem, or does Ryan Day have a Michigan problem, or is it just a general problem with tightness? And he kind of showed me and showed you that if it's not Michigan, I mean, and it's the postseason, all things are firing the right way. I mean, I was really excited to see the progression of the offense, I guess. I was excited to see that they finally opened things up. Now, I know that obviously they threw more passes against Michigan than they did against Tennessee, but the style of passes, like the pure just
bingo
attempt and focus and clear game plan advantage. Like, I want to push the ball downfield the whole way through. So seeing that early, I thought was really nice. And then as soon as you see that in the first quarter, it's like, okay, like I know what kind of game this is. I know what version of this Ohio State team I'm going to get. I know what version of Ryan Day I'm going to get. And honestly, Sam, I don't know how you felt, but it makes Ryan Day the most exciting and the most frustrating coach to watch in the entire sport. So frustrating and so exciting because you'll get a game plan like the Michigan game plan, and you'll wonder, is this the right guy? Like what's going on? What's wrong? And then all of a sudden, against a very good SEC team, against a very good defense, you'll get the version of, oh, that's the one I know. That's the one that I've seen before. And when you get that version of Ryan Day, good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, it reminded me of Michigan State versus Ohio State 2021, that first quarter did. And at that point, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this game's over. Like, you can't – Tennessee, guys, I know most of you watched the game, of course, but they shut out Ohio State in the second half, and it didn't matter because that's how dominant the first quarter was.
I mean, Sam, you could take it a step further. You could take Ohio State's first quarter versus Tennessee's entire game, and Ohio State still wins.
It's insane. It's ceilings and floors, man, and whether you can like play closer to your ceiling consistently or how you really balance that out. It's just, I mean, I was I thought that Tennessee was going to lose. I thought that Ohio State was going to beat them by 3 scores, originally 2 scores, but sadly didn't release the deep dive for that game in time enough to where I changed it for 3 scores. I didn't expect it to be 21-0 at the end of the first quarter, where they made Tennessee's secondary players, really Jeremiah Smith made them look like school children. And Tennessee's D-line and O-line, we talked about it, you and I did, and I also talked about it in my videos, where the trench advantage that everyone was talking about, the data didn't back that up, and it was even worse than what I thought it was going to be, where you and I think both agreed Ohio State may actually have some, pass rush and pass protection advantages here. Tennessee got no sacks outside of that one, which was a face mask. Correct. Ohio State got 4, and Henderson made things happen on the ground, in part because on some plays, the O-line did just enough, along with Tennessee's defense being a little bit off, to where Henderson just end zone. He found it multiple times.
And it's obviously like a new offensive line makeup. And, you saw there was an emphasis on kind of trying to get the ball to the perimeter. The inside runs were there, but a lot of it was like, can we get to the perimeter? Because of how new and patchwork the interior of the O-line was. But this game, Sam, you and I talked obviously for about an hour last time, and you and I both thought that this game would be, at least I thought that this game would be a low scoring game. I thought this would be like in the cold, an Ohio State offense that's been really inconsistent all year, but the defense has really come on strong lately. I thought that this game was going to be like a race to 20, and it ended up being a race to 20, but I didn't see Ohio State scoring 40, I guess. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. And then honestly, like where I was 2 weeks ago, like, hopeful about this team. After that game, I feel confident that Ohio State's best could beat anybody else's best in the country. And I'll stand by that, especially heading into what I think could be the national title this week in Oregon, Ohio State.
Yeah. 21-0 end of the first quarter. Defense is firing on all cylinders. When Ohio State was getting pressure on Tennessee with 4, I think that even more than the downfield passing is what told me in my head, oh, this game's over. If Ohio State can get pressure on you with their 4, which they've struggled to do for much of the year, it's game over, because their backfield is so good that you're not going to consistently pass on them or consistently run on them if their D-line can just work by itself and everyone else can function, just making sure nothing big happens and keeping everything in front of them. I think that's when Noles' defense is at its best, and Tennessee couldn't do really anything outside of run Nico, and I imagine he had to take an ice bath after that game. He took so many hits and was just under duress all the time.
They cracked 2 helmets.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that, but yeah, like one of the first plays cracked his helmet. When did the second crack happen?
I don't know when the second crack happened. I just saw the picture of both his helmets after the game, so I don't know when the other crack occurred. But part of that has to be a function of the cold, right? And then the other the function is like they had to run him a little bit a lot because Dylan had the hamstring tightness, I believe, is what sidelined him for that game.
Yeah. What did you think about them exercising shirtless in the cold? My thought is that was just like a show of force that turned out to be pathetic. Is that your interpretation of it?
It was showmanship. It was a little bit overdone for me. And also for me, like as someone who I got really into like sports science through my love of baseball, actually. And like one of the things that I always talk about in baseball is that like you want your internal temperature for performance wise to heat up. You don't want it to be cooled down. And so it just felt like a little silly thing. And then I saw the extended video from someone that sent it to me from the game. So they came out shirtless for only 3 or 4 minutes, and then they all went back inside. So it was just a social media stunt. And obviously, like looking back, it looks really bad. And that's going to be one of those things that gets mocked and gets memed for the next 5 to 6 years for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, all I can really say is, it's Tennessee. This was the best team they've played all season long, at least in terms of ceiling. Georgia doesn't have Ohio State's weapons. Georgia doesn't have Ohio State's quarterback. They don't even have Ohio State's secondary analytically. Right. And yeah, it's just, road environment. They had a long time to prepare. They came out looking confused and shaky, and Ohio State just like kind of took it right to them. It was impressive. My thoughts on Day overall, I confess, haven't really changed since before the game, but I was impressed. I was impressed with how the offense looked, how the defense looked, and I think that, at this point, the conversation is now, go on to win it all, like beat Oregon, everything's in front of you. If you lose, it's time to, reset entering 2025. I think the only way, and you can please add insight here, the only way I think he was ever getting canned after this year is if he lost to Tennessee at home.
It would have had to been a loss to Tennessee, and then even then, I think it would have been a hey, look for another job instead of just outright firing him. I think it's kind of what would have been the direction.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, like as a coach that's ascending, he's got a lot of flaws. But even after that win, I need him to still do two things. I need him to learn from his mistakes, and he's got to at some point beat Michigan. Like he has to get over that hump.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unacceptable to lose that many times in a row, especially in the fashion of 2024. And that's something that like Nick. What did you think about what Nick Saban said? Let's just quickly pivot there, because I understand the sentiment a little bit, because personally as a Michigan fan, if Harbaugh lost to OSU more times than he did, but maybe won an additional title, I'd take that, full stop. Or maybe it had an additional playoff win, maybe even I'd think about it. But then again, I also get the, it's the best rivalry in the sport, and you're really hungry for that win if you're an Ohio State fan. Like, understandably
it's easy.
so.
It's easy for Nick Saban to say, because Nick Saban never lost to Auburn 4 straight times. It's like he can say that.
Boom.
But when he was beating Auburn all those years, Auburn was going through coach after coach, correct?
Yeah.
So like,
oh yeah.
for me, I thought it was a little bit silly, but it's this kind of thing where above the rivalry, beefing, there's always going to be like the coaches fraternity, and it felt like him almost sticking up for Ryan Day, and it felt like the last like 2 weeks there's been a lot of coaches, a lot of former coaches, kind of sticking up for Ryan Day, I guess, and that's how I viewed that, because I mean, at the end of the day, like you have to be your rival, like dude. It would be one thing if he only lost one and everyone was up in arms about it, but this is the 4th straight loss with a $20 million roster. Like all the criticism that Ryan Day got for that loss was absolutely earned and deserved.
Yes.
100%. Like I would get Nick Saban's point if they only lost one. Okay, like yeah, like don't melt down. Like does it suck? Yeah. Do you got to beat rivals? Yeah. End of the world? Slightly. End of the planet? Probably not. But 4 straight. Ohio State fans have every right to criticize Ryan Day for that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be comparable to 2022 Michigan losing to 2011 Ohio State at home. Like,
correct.
That's how big that upset was, and that would make – I would have thrown or punched something, probably my bed, not to mess anything up. But
don't want to break anything, Sam. Don't break anything, Sam.
Exactly, but that would be that would suck, and I empathize. I try my best to empathize with that. And I think that while I understand him sticking up for Day or saying, look, this guy's like won all of his like games, if Nick Saban lost to Auburn in 21, 22, and 23, I think a lot of Alabama fans would have started thinking about, hey, this guy doesn't have it up his sleeve anymore. Get him out of here.
I mean, if at the very least it would it wouldn't be a black eye, but it would be a little ketchup stain on a white shirt that is the legacy.
Yeah, it would be frustrating, and we all know like how people and recency bias are. I mean, they would start thinking he's won titles here, but he hasn't gotten us to the college football playoff. He's losing to our rival, and things just don't look good moving forward. So yeah, I think what you said spot on. He wasn't losing to Auburn every year. Not even every other year most of the time, just when they were good and when he was playing them on the road. So looking into the quarterfinals, by the way, for those of you watching, I'm going to be doing play-by-play and live review for all of those quarterfinals, so hit the notification bell. Looking at these quarterfinals, before we talk about the Rose Bowl, would you care to give your predictions for the other games? The other 3?
Well, here we go. So, you want quick predictions, or you want kind of my in-depth? Because I do have a show sheet over here.
Do whatever you want. I mean, we have time.
So, At some point, there's going to have to be an upset in the postseason, right?
You think? Or do you think that
Or
because of how college football is, that maybe talent, like, of course, recruiting rankings don't correlate directly with national champions, but they do a little bit. And we all know how talent heavy it is. So, really?
I
Just
think
as
you're
a
going to get one
question.
upset. I think
Okay.
at least I hope so. For me, I think a healthy climate of college football is for there to be at least one upset. And if I had to like circle an upset, I think Notre Dame upsets Georgia. Now it's pretty close to a pick'em game. Right now, Georgia is a 1.5 point favorite, which basically is a pick'em game.
Yeah.
But I like Notre Dame there. Marcus Freeman, young coach. I always harp on learning from your mistakes. They are the defense I trust the most, and I think their offense is super efficient and will stay on schedule. And I just don't think Georgia, with a new quarterback and how volatile their offense has been, will have enough for them. So that's my belief on the Sugar Bowl. I don't know if you have any comments on that before I move to the Fiesta Bowl.
The only one I would have is, if I'm being honest, the only reason I picked Georgia was Kirby Smart. Like I did there. The analytics say Notre Dame. It's why they opened up as a favorite. But then I just think people see it's Kirby Smart versus Marcus Freeman and think Kirby, and they just kind of slam what they view as the easy button. Plus, Georgia does have a very long break, like the same one that Ohio State had before Tennessee, whereas Notre Dame probably early on maybe had to show some things to get ahead. But analytically, that's the one that makes the most sense in terms of upsets, I think, is Notre Dame overthrowing Georgia with the QB situation like you mentioned.
And also, if Notre Dame can't beat this Georgia team, I don't think they'll ever get there.
That's true, although you know what? I can't really argue with that. I was going to say it's only year 3, and I think Notre Dame will get even maybe better than this, but I don't know.
But this will be the worst Georgia team since 2020.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Probably. And so, I don't know. I think Notre Dame has to win this game. And for the sake of Midwest college football, I think that's important. So I do pick them for that as well.
I hope Notre Dame wins. I will say that personally.
I got Penn State over Boise State. I think Penn State's got too much for them. And I think, James Franklin is going to moonwalk to the Final Four. Their defense looks so good, so electric. And honestly, I probably would have picked SMU to beat Boise State. I like Genty a lot. I think Genty needed these days off because if you watched him late in the year last year, the legs looked absolutely burnt out.
Yeah, because they just kept slamming him because he's their offense.
So I think Penn State wins that game pretty handily, and then Arizona State Texas. That game has the biggest spread. I believe Texas is a 12.5 point favorite. I want to pick Arizona State so bad. I really do.
Yeah. My friend of the channel, if he sees this, won't like the fact that I'm kind of rooting for an Arizona State upset because he's a big Texas fan. But my model has Texas with the widest margin of victory.
The widest margin. Yeah.
So it's close with Penn State, Boise, actually, but Boise State's closer to the Fiesta Bowl than Penn State is, and Texas is closer to the Peach Bowl. So when you factor in travel, I think that Texas, especially with their lines of scrimmage, should roll them. Doesn't mean they will, but yeah, I agree with that. You want to pick them, but logically, this doesn't make sense.
I do think of all the offenses, I think the Arizona State offense has a good chance to go supernova, if you will. I think that's what makes them a dangerous team. I think they have the lowest floor, but not the highest ceiling, maybe the second or third highest ceiling. Because offensive production wise, like Sam does a really good job. They can push the ball down the field. And Scatterboo, I know a lot of people are just now getting hip to him after the title game that they had, but he's been good all year. Just a guy that can really wear you down. So they've got a chance with Kenny Dillingham, who likes to call a really aggressive game plan. If they start hitting 3-pointers, as I call them, they could be a dangerous team. But even in a shootout, like you have to feel good about if you're Texas.
Yeah, it's really the question of, can Arizona State go super? I love that, by the way. Thank you for saying that. If they can go supernova, and also if Texas's offense can just do what it's done for much of the year, which is it falls apart at random points for
they just
whatever
sputter.
reason.
They just sputter for like 2-3 quarters at a time. It's so odd to watch, especially because you and I both are avid watchers of the sport. Sark is one of the best in the business in terms of quarterback development and in terms of play calling. So to see them sputter for 2-3 quarters is always super fascinating to me.
Yeah, especially since, good receivers, good lines of scrimmage. I understand that running backs are hurt, but your rushing attack, I mean, this year's a perfect example of this. Like, Henderson and Judkins are the best running back duo in the nation. I still believe that even after, some of the things this year, the struggles. But those struggles are because of the O-line.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Michigan in like 20, any of the years probably didn't have the same talent in the backfield this Ohio State backfield does, but the lines of scrimmage produce the run game. So Texas's struggles in the rushing attack, I think, circle to something deeper than just running back injuries. And I think it's the same thing with their passing attack. There's just some lack of connection there that I can't describe at all. All right.
Fair.
So, yeah, the only one I disagree, and I don't really disagree with it, it's just I don't want to pick against Kirby Smart for the nth time in a row and be wrong. Good previews. I really like those points that you had there.
Thank you, sir.
Of course. So now getting on to the Rose Bowl here. What's your view of this? You mentioned earlier that many view this as the de facto national championship game. And what do you think's the most important point in this game?
Honestly, I think it's going to be a quarterback duel. As wild as it sounds, I think this will be what quarterback plays better. Game one, Dylan Gabriel played better, executed late down the stretch, was able to use his legs and willing to use his legs. Obviously, had the long rushing touchdown and took advantage of an Ohio State secondary that plays guys on islands a good amount because they are super talented. So I think this will be about the quarterbacks, and then I think the other side of it is defensive ends. Whatever pair of defensive ends plays the best to hinder the other quarterback, I think will give that team the best chance to win. Obviously, Birch and Mateo, uber talented, sometimes leave a little bit to be desired, but other times they both flash crazy. That Oregon big three on the D-line, I think is incredibly talented, and that might be the biggest gap in talent anywhere on the field in terms of the Ohio State offensive line versus that three on the Oregon defensive line. Obviously, Harmon in the middle, to me is a top 5 defensive lineman, defensive tackle in America. Him paired up with Birch and Mateo, honestly, has the recipe for disaster if you are Ohio State. And for me, that's why I think you need to have a big game from Will Howard. The ball has to come out quick. You have to be decisive. You have to be accurate. And you have to continue to do something that we hadn't seen really much of the year, throw the ball to the running backs. That was one of the things in the Tennessee game that really allowed them to open up some more things. For, I believe, the first or second time this year, the running backs were top 3 in the team in receiving yards. So, I mean, you need all those things to hit if you are Ohio State, because I do think this game will likely be a shootout, being in Pasadena.
Yeah, that's a really good point there. I loved how they got Henderson involved. I think he's a huge mismatch for a lot of guys with his speed, athleticism, and just him being, I think, really the full package. I view him as a non-negotiable player, kind of an alien, if you will. Maybe that makes more sense. I think that it's very similar to what you said. I think the question in this game is, can the air attack matter more than the trenches? Like, can that battle be so fierce? And this is more so for Ohio State, but it could be the case with Oregon too, that the quarterback play and wide receiver play ends up mattering more than what's going on at the lines of scrimmage. And I think the good news, if you're an Ohio State fan, is I believe that Ohio State's passing offense, in part because of talent and in part because of experience, is better suited to have success through the air with some issues up front, I think, compared to Oregon. I can't, it's not something I know, but it's something that I intuitively feel a little bit. I feel like Oregon relies more on elite pass protection to have success through the air, while Ohio State can be a little bit more gamey and risky and kind of rely on Howard to maneuver around the pocket. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be magical. I think it's going to be close. It's really fascinating to see, Will Stein. I was just watching some film 2 days ago on this. Will Stein really outcoached Jim Knowles that first time around.
He absolutely did.
Really.
Coach, circles around him.
Every time, there were 2 plays, I think it was on the same drive, it was the Oregon final drive, where Knowles sent a blitz up the middle, halfback toss, 3rd and 6, first down. Another play, it was kind of like, I want to say a wheel route, PI, first down, basically same blitz. I'm curious to see.
I mean, there was one more, Sam. There was the other one where Ohio State sent a middle blitz and they ran a speed option on the outside.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean that was, and then the quarterback run that Dylan Gabriel scored on. Like it felt like just like Jim Knowles was playing checkers and Oregon was playing chess at a high clip.
Yeah, whenever Knowles was aggressive in that game, Oregon just that's when Oregon's biggest plays were. Is they took advantage of his calculated aggression, and it was really, really impressive. And so that's something I'm paying attention to. And another thing that I think is fascinating here is the differences from Oregon's D-line getting Birch back to Ohio State no longer having McLaughlin, who, in watching more Ohio State games, because, one game sample size isn't a whole lot to scan through, he was moving Penn State's D-line, which is impressive because that's one of the best D-lines in the country. And he was also moving Oregon's D-line a little bit too. I think on one of the long Henderson runs, he got through to the second level and just took a few guys with him. I mean, he deserved the Remington Trophy, and whether Carson Hinsman and the interior O-line can step up, or whether Ohio State with Chip Kelly and Ryan Day find a way to scheme around that and still have success.
Yeah, I do have a huge concern because the first time that Ohio State played Oregon, Simmons was playing and Birch was not. Obviously, Simmons was the best lineman, I believe, on the Ohio State team, and he went down in that game. And then Ohio State adds Birch. So it's like that is kind of one of the concerns. But this Ohio State team, since that game, almost feels entirely different.
Really? I mean, on defense, there have been noticeable improvements.
Yeah, on defense, that's the big one on defense because I mean, before the Tennessee game, I mean, the last passing touchdown they gave up was against Oregon.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point of conversation I want to get to, because there are some people saying that that's like proof that the secondary is going to basically not break for the rest of the year. But then I know there's probably other people who think, no, this is because like Aller and Imaliava and Warren and Rourke are like not nearly as good as Gabriel. Do you think the truth is like somewhere in the middle? Like Oregon is
somewhere in the middle and really relying on like wide receiver play. Like they haven't seen a unit like this since Oregon.
Yeah, like Oregon is probably the only Ohio State's probably ahead of them with wide receivers, and then Gabriel's a top 3-2 QB in
Absolutely.
QBR.
I mean, he just went to the Heisman ceremony, and you're talking about like Tez, Evan Stewart, and Trayshawn Holden. So I mean, you're talking about some guys, some guys out there.
They're tight ends, Sadiq and Ferguson too. I'm curious. I
like Ferguson a lot, man. I like Ferguson a lot. Really good player.
Yeah, how Ransom and Downs and then Simon, how the linebackers and safeties do against them is going to be really fascinating, because Sadiq's kind of the athlete, Ferguson's the reliable guy from how I understand it. So who do you think's going to win here? Are you going to roll with your Buckeyes, which it's understandable, they're favored and you should expect them to win, I think, at this point.
I like Ohio State based on what I saw. It seems like Ryan Day has completely shed the Michigan loss and isn't dwelling on it too much. And this Ohio State team, on all cylinders, I think is the best team in America. I'm not too worried about that game being out west. I know Ohio State travels really well, and traditionally at the Rose Bowl, there's been a lot of red there. And I think Chip Kelly finally beats his old team because he hasn't done it yet. He has not done it yet. So I do like Ohio State. I think the vibes are right. The feeling is right. I do have concerns though, because obviously, like, I love Dan Lanning. I think Dan Lanning is a great coach, and the last thing I would want to face is Dan Lanning with a chip on his shoulder, and they just went 13-0 and somehow have a chip on their shoulder because they are underdogs in this game. But I do feel pretty good about Ohio State in this game.
Yeah, that's understandable. It's again, 2.5 point spread for OSU. Game is basically viewed by many as a pick'em. That's kind of where I'm at here. I'm going with Oregon, and a huge part of it is just what you mentioned. It's Dan Lanning with the same amount of time to prepare that Ohio State had against Tennessee. That's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, because Ohio State has that edge through the air. Better safeties, better DBs, better receivers, a quarterback who's pretty close, and they have good pass protection. And Oregon is better in the trenches, but we've seen games before, like Oregon against Penn State, where Penn State won on the ground, but Oregon was just so dominant through the air. and they just stayed one step ahead to where they came out and they won, and it could have been by double digits in the Big Ten championship game. So I think no matter what you pick here, as long as it's within a touchdown, because I think while Oregon's the better team, I have a really hard time seeing them winning by more than 7, just because how it all matches up. Pick Ohio State to win by 7 or less, or Oregon by 7 or less. I think that your prediction's at least okay.
Yeah. I have Ohio State by 4, we'll call it.
Yeah, that's, what, both teams score in the 30s, or do you think that it's going to be a little bit of a more defensive showing as Knowles adjusts?
I think both teams get to the 30s.
Okay.
I'm not super high on Oregon's overall defense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, especially given I think their performance against Penn State and how Penn State was just able to run all over them. Personally, I thought that had more to do with Penn State and the fact that they just hit on all cylinders on offense, but I could be wrong. I see it being a little bit of a lower scoring game just with Knowles adjusting, and also the fact that Ohio State's worse on O-line. So I think both defenses will have a little bit more of an edge, but I'm excited. If I'm wrong, if I'm right, this is going to be a really fun game.
It has all the makings of a classic, man. It's got all the makings of a classic.
Exactly, and it's a rematch too. Do you think that rematches are good for the sport?
I do. I think they're good for the sport. I'm back and forth in who has the advantage in the rematch. So,
yeah, I think it's great for the sport. I'd love to see Michigan and Ohio State play 3 times. I know that bugs some people, but I think that would
be careful, Sam. People don't like that.
I think it would be incredible because think about it. Like maybe Michigan or Ohio State win the first 2 games, and then the loser of the first 2 wins the third, like in the Natty or the playoffs. Just maximum chaos right there because then, 33% win percentage on the year, but we won the game that mattered the most. So
the big one.
All the debates, it just would be absolutely incredible here. Think about it this way, viewer. If Ohio State wins this game, those 2 losses sting, but they get 12 wins. You get to face Texas in the Cotton Bowl, a team who has issues, let's say, and you got revenge against at least one of your losses. I'd say that is a much better outcome for the season than losing, obviously, or maybe even playing against someone else in the Rose Bowl. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more, Sam.
So, a few more things that I wanted to get to here, just in relationship to the game. Are your thoughts on Justin Fry changed at all after Tennessee? I know that some people have been speaking on Twitter or other circles. Some have been acting like he's been impressive. I respectfully disagree with that. But what do you think? You still think should be out, kind of no matter what?
I'm still. I mean, here's the thing. I think Justin Fry will never get the credit here, deserved or not deserved. I think Ohio State fans have kind of made up their mind on Justin Fry. I think Justin Fry is a good coach, but I do think he needs to go elsewhere and continue to grow in his coaching development. I just think that him and Ryan Day are maybe not a fit together. I think against Tennessee, he showed that he's absolutely capable of developing or at least patching together an offensive line. But on the flip side, the offensive line is so thin because of the numbers issues that they have every year. I thought beforehand he was gone, and I thought that was part of the reason why Ohio State was not landing transfer portal offensive linemen. Since then, they've gone on a run. They've added 2 tackles, one of them being one of the top tackles in the portal, the kid from Rice. And I think maybe that is enough to save his job. But until I see him get that extended, then I will almost venture to guess that he will not be back next year. I'm not entirely sure. But my opinion on him is kind of the same. I don't think him and Ryan Day are a perfect match. I think that he struggles in adding numbers in recruiting, and that's an issue. I think he's good at getting guys ready for games, and I think that's been proven all year. At no point this year did I look at the offensive line and feel like, oh, wow, they got absolutely outclassed. Or the times I looked at the offensive line and felt like, oh, like this is a terrible game plan because of who's on this offensive line. Yes. And does some of that go to Justin Fry? Sure. But for a position coach to deal with those kind of injuries all year and be that thin at the position, is partially his fault, but not all his fault. It's bad luck, yes, but at the same time, this has been your room for how many years, and the numbers are so scarce.
Yeah, it's been year 3. I agree. I mean, obviously, I'm just a guy sitting in his studio. I've never played or coached, so I'm not acting like I can do better than Justin Fry. That'd be very arrogant. My view on this is all the starters. Correct me if I'm wrong. Aren't all the starters 4 or 5 stars at a high school?
The current starters or the starters before the year?
Current starters. I know that Simmons.
Current starters, I believe they are all 4 or 5 stars. I'd have to look on just maybe one. But yeah, they're all 4 or 5 stars from.
That's kind of what I thought, because I know Shabola was like a top 100 player. I know that Hinsman was a 4-star. Jackson was a 5-star. Montgomery, who's now been worked in the rotation, high-level player. And I just kind of thought to myself in watching these games, like rewatching them, and then having that in mind, because I didn't think of that before. I guess I failed to realize that, hey, they actually have like they don't recruit bodies, but outside of like this past cycle or two, they've gotten a lot of blue chip talent there.
Yeah. Josh Fryer is a 3-star. Was a 3-star.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually wow. I thought he was a 4-star for some reason. My bad. But I think that I don't know. I think I'm on your side with this. I think he kind of just has to go for upgrade's sake, even if they win it all, and even if the line kind of looks like is what it is. It's what you said after the Michigan game. It's the block O. That's what matters here. And I think that the best thing that Ryan Day can do for the block O, outside of hiring a special teams coach, is probably getting a really good offensive line coach. And yeah, I just think that when you have blue chip talent, when you have all the skill position players you have in an elite defense, the offensive line's job isn't as hard as, let's say, Northwestern's or Wisconsin's or Central Michigan's. And I just think that it's Ohio State, and maybe that's not sound analysis, but that's kind of where it ends, is you need to have near elite players and depth there, and you need to be able to be balanced. I mean, that's why they brought in Chip Kelly, and they haven't been able to be balanced, in part because it's not all on Fry, but some of it is, obviously, like you said.
Yeah, and Fry's interesting, man, because like I still think he's a really good offensive line coach. I just think that here at Ohio State, he's going to be the scapegoat. He's going to be the one that gets a lot of the blame because of the recruiting lack of bodies, right? Like that's the big thing, like lack of bodies. And we're gonna, I mean, at some point, it feels like Ohio State's going to turn into we're going to need 3 portal linemen every single year, and you shouldn't want that. And for Justin Fry, like if you don't have the freedom to go get the numbers that you want in, then I think like for your own growth and progression, you need to go somewhere that allows you to run your offensive line room the way you want to, assuming that this is not the way you want to run it.
So you think his issue is more so that's just like not the right fit for more so how he recruits and how he develops, not that he's just like bad at his job?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, like at Ohio State, some coaches just think that the numbers will just be there. Like you just stumble into a room every recruiting class, and I think maybe that's a little bit what's going on, because I think he's a really good offensive line coach, and he had numbers at UCLA and places like that.
Yeah.
But this year at Ohio State, just feel like the numbers aren't there. And honestly, like I've been the loudest champion. I don't care about rankings when it comes to offensive linemen. Just go get me 4 or 5 high school kids that you like every year, and then develop them.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan's the example of that. Like 3 stars, 4 stars, develop, because cohesion matters the most there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so that was one, because I think that after the Tennessee game, it's kind of like the up-down and the bipolarness of it all. Day after the Michigan game, understandably, a lot of people want him fired. After the Tennessee game, many have cooled off. Before the Michigan game, they're being talked about, understandably, as national champions. It's the nature of the sport and fan bases going up and down. Something that was interesting about the Tennessee game, I thought, is that the game plan looked a lot like what you said. Ryan Day uncorked. Like he's not being held down. He's not holding himself back. He's just unleashing everything. It felt like that was a Ryan Day game. Like that was his game plan, and I don't know this for sure, but it almost felt like at times that it was him calling plays. Do you have any insight on that?
I do not, Sam.
All right. Well, what did you think about that game plan, and do you think it like resembled more of Day or Kelly?
That resembled more of classic Day. And if that's the version of Ryan Day that Ohio State has moving forward, then you should feel very confident about the rest of the playoffs. That felt like a guy who believed in his passing scheme and a guy who believed in his players for the first time all season.
Yeah, it was incredible. It felt like they passed more downfield in that game than over several series of games before. That was
Yeah, I mean, it felt like more in one game than there was in the previous 4 or 5 games combined.
wow. It's just unbelievable. And Howard was connecting with his receivers too. It wasn't just the amount of attempts, but he was just dot after dot after dot,
And the
dime.
style of pass play too, because again, Ohio State threw the ball more against Michigan than they did against Tennessee. Will Howard had more attempts against Michigan, but the attempts against Michigan were all of the don't make mistake attempts,
Yeah,
the
they're
don't crash
conservative.
the car attempts. Against Tennessee, it was okay. We're no longer in a school zone. Well, let's go. Let's go get it going. And utilizing the best player in the country, I think the best receiver in the country, Jeremiah Smith, will always pay dividends. Always.
Yes, indeed. I look for him to have a huge game against Oregon, regardless of the outcome there. I mean,
Mhm.
Oregon's corners I think are really good, but their secondary as a whole I just don't think has the bodies to cover all of Ohio State's wide receivers. They're just that deep, that good. And then finally, what would a win mean? What would a win mean for this team? Not just this year in the playoffs, but also moving forward for your view on Ryan Day and for your perspective on the program moving forward. Because I know a win here is pretty big. It'd be a pretty big deal to win the Rose Bowl and get revenge on Oregon in a game that matters even more than the regular season matchup.
A win here keeps you at least atop of everyone's preseason Big Ten rankings, and a win here does a lot for high school recruiting as well. Ohio State's having a little bit of a difficult time with Oregon in the recruiting process, the swagger that Oregon's had, and kind of the momentum that Oregon has. A win here not only kind of slows that momentum down, it catapults your momentum as well, and it signals, okay, for the first time in a Nick Sabanless college football, the field is wide open, and if you can be the one to capture the first one post Nick Saban, that matters a lot. You've got a chance to get your first national title and start to corner the market. So it means a lot because the winner of this one, Oregon or Ohio State, is going to have a massive, massive notch in their belt that they'll take into recruiting. They'll be waving around the big weapon, moving forward. So it's this game is almost a secondary Big Ten title game. It's the battle of the huge brands and the young coaches that are looking to break through in the next part of their career. And you got to be first if you're Ryan Day because you're supposed to win this game. You've been here longer.
Yeah. Amen. Amen to that. So do you think that the winner of this game is basically the number one Big Ten program entering next year?
I do. I do believe that. Now, obviously, like things change, and there is kind of that weird dark horse lurking on the other side of the bracket, with Penn State having a chance to potentially moonwalk to the final. But in terms of like brand prowess and recruiting prowess, and big shiny belts, I think this Rose Bowl means so much.
Yeah, I made a tweet really late at night basically saying that if Ohio State, from my perspective, if they don't want to get passed as the number one Big Ten program right now, you got to beat Oregon.
You have to.
You have to right now. Because being 0-2 against them, they get to go on to finish ahead of you whether they win it all or not. And then on top of that, with the possibility of Penn State advancing, you do not want to finish third in the college football playoff amongst Big Ten teams. Just
Correct.
don't want it. Don't want that to happen.
That's exactly it, Sam.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited. Again, everyone, I'm going to be doing play-by-play live review of that game. It's going to be incredible. I'm pumped. I'm very excited. I think this will be a battle for the ages. And thank you, Kris, very much for coming on and for joining us here. I've appreciated connecting with you over these past few weeks and having you on. It's been incredible, honestly.
It's a vibe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
All right, everyone. Well, You think we're all set? You think we've covered all the bases? I mean, I pretty much
do.
think that we have. All right, sweet. Well, we've covered everything. Obviously, there's the deep dive that you guys can watch if you care. It's about an hour long of me just talking about this game. There's the preview, and there will be even more videos about this. Shorter ones, thankfully, but there will be more because there's just so much to talk about this game. Make sure to check out Kris Drew, Kris is how you spell Chris, on Twitter. And also look up Menace to Sports on YouTube. Give him a follow on Twitter, a subscription on YouTube. Is there any other way people can reach you?
At me on Twitter, man. That's it. Just kind of the base stuff, Menace to Sports everywhere, and then me on Twitter.
All right, awesome. And before we get out of here, make sure again, everyone, to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Have a great day, everyone. Go Buckeyes, and also for you Duck fans watching, go Ducks. We will see you all very soon. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also hit that notification bell so that way you can get notified when new content from College Football with Sam drops. I appreciate you very much, and also share the video around to others who you know enjoy the sport of college football and love it as I do and as you do, and comment your thoughts down below so that we can have a conversation, because I want to know what you are thinking. And join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Thank you to my Heisman Patreon members, Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Kylo OH. Thank you to my All-American Patreon members, Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye. And thank you to my All-Conference members, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus. Make sure to check out my merchandise store and or Patreon page, or super chat down in the comment section below to support the channel. The Patreon page and merchandise store links are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. I hope you have a wonderful day. It is December, so Merry Christmas and also Happy New Year. I will see you guys soon.